Hello and welcome to Conservative Corner. I'm your host, Tom Mountain, and we are a monthly talk show based here in the wonderful new TV studios in Newton, Massachusetts. Now, you haven't seen us in a few months, and that's because we have been sidelined due to inclement weather, specifically the tremendous snowstorms, i.e. blizzards, that we've experienced. We've been postponed twice, but I'm here to assure you that we are here and we will be with you every month from here on in, unless we do have an April snowstorm, which is not beyond the pale of expectation. But nevertheless, we're here and we're very glad to be here. Essentially what we do on a monthly basis is, given that Newton and Massachusetts in general are very, shall we say, liberal enclaves in the United States, we more or less have a different perspective in that we explore issues and controversies from a moderate to conservative perspective, or should I say a mainstream perspective. So we go against the grain, the political grain that is in this state and community. And as such, we have a big following here in Newton, but also in the Bay State across the Massachusetts. We've gotten very good reviews and we're very happy to be doing this, and we'll continue to do it for a very long time. This week has been an extraordinary week in American politics, and it's largely due to one man in particular, and that is President Donald J. Trump. We've all saw last week his State of the Union address, which, by the way, was the longest State of the Union in history. Say what you want about Donald Trump, he does love to talk, and he talked a lot. But, you know, it's the old adage, a good speaker can hold a group of 500 people for an unlimited amount of time. A bad speaker cannot even hold a group of 5 people. But Donald Trump is in the former. Donald Trump is a magnificent speaker, and he can hold an audience, and what he said and did was really, truly extraordinary. We'll get into that a little later. Also, and what is happening right now as we speak, is the current war against the terrorist nation of Iran. That is long overdue. The United States should have attacked and decapitated Iran, the revolutionary Islamic Republic, a long time ago, but it took Donald Trump to finally do it. And they're doing it right on the cusp of them getting a nuclear bomb, because if they get a nuclear weapon, they will use it. That, in addition to Iran being a terrorist state and sponsoring terrorist groups around the world and killing in excess of 1,000 American personnel, embassy staff, and also American military personnel in the Middle East and elsewhere. And this is in the span of a week. It's an ongoing war. It's an ongoing conflict. So we will see what the results, how long it will take. But the end result will be that Iran will be completely neutralized, because you have the full might of the United States and Israel attacking Iran, and they won't be able to recover or survive from that. Although we did think that last summer they were decapitated, but that was not to be the case. I actually wrote a feature-length column in the Boston Herald highlighting that, but it was a bit premature, and I wish I had waited until now to write it. But nevertheless, that's what's happening. So Tip O'Neill, a famous Democrat, once said, all politics is local. And tonight we have with us an individual who is very active on a statewide Republican level, and he's been a community activist here in Newton for a very long time. And he's really typical, or shall we say, typical of what an activist should be, a community activist, in that he's very much involved with the community on many different levels. And most importantly, he ran for mayor of the city of Newton in the last term. He didn't win, but he made it to the finals, and he took the gallant, courageous step of running for mayor, and for which we're very grateful that he did that. And that, of course, is Al Cechinelli, my dear friend, who's been a Newton resident for most of his life, all of his life, I believe. Thank you, Al, so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
And this is one of the few times where I've had you over the years where you're not running for something, at least not right now. So more or less, you don't have to indulge with any campaign speeches or any talking points for the election, for any type of election. So we can speak freely and unencumbered and because neither of us are running for anything, so we're not catering to the voters. Although, with you in particular, what I've noticed over time is that you're not a polished politician, and that's meant as a compliment, meaning you don't need to carefully choose your words and actions like the lawyer that you are, but you're a very untypical lawyer in that sense, and that you're not like a Clinton or Obama in that you choose every word carefully. You speak from the heart, you say what you feel, and you mean what you say, for which we're grateful. We need more people in the community like you. But Al, this year in 2026, we've already finished with the municipal elections across the state. So this year is a statewide election. And unfortunately, with the Republican Party, out of all the statewide offices, there is not a single Republican in any of them. And that is from governor down to state auditor. They're all taken by Democrats, not just Democrats, but very left-wing Democrats, with the exception of the Secretary of State, Mr. Galvin, who's been there forever. Not only that, but all 9 Congress people are also Democrats. And so we are at a loss to have any type of significant representation, Republican representation, on a statewide level. That's unfortunate. That's very unfortunate. And since Charlie Baker chose to forego a 3rd term, which he could have run, there's no state law against it, although it's traditional for a governor to leave after 2 terms. So we're pretty much in a Republican opposition, and we're the backbenchers. And one thing that I've noticed in particular, both in the state and on the state level and the city level, is that we have, I believe, it's around 24 Republican state representatives out of 160, and we only have 5 state senators out of 40. And it used to be that there was sort of like a camaraderie or a gentleman's agreement that those Republicans who were congenial or whom they were friendly with were more or less left untouched. They didn't have people running against them. Well, the Democrats pretty much have this time around at least dispensed with that traditional philosophy, and they're going after all Republicans. And I was just informed that my friend Donald Wong, who's a Republican state committee member, as am I, and he's a state representative from Saugus. He's the owner-proprietor of the Cowlin Restaurant. He has an opponent, and everybody likes Donald Wong. The Republicans do, the Democrats do, but they're going after him as well. And that's happening across the state where other Republicans who have been in office for a while, state reps, they're going after them. Now, why is that? Because my own feeling is, and I've used other Republicans as a sounding board, and they concur, is that the Democrats in the state, they're so far to the left that they see nationwide they can't do anything. They can't do anything at all to change the national scene. However, on a statewide level, they can circle the wagons and do what they can to make this state at least a Republican-free state. And they're trying their best to do it. Not only that, but on a city level, the mayor of Newton gave a very surprising speech in that he acknowledged in so many words what was happening across the country where it's very Republican. However, Newton will be different. We're going to keep this out of Newton. Newton will be different. Newton is special. We won't have any of this coming into Newton. By that, he means, of course, the Republican agenda, so to speak. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm actually not very happy with the way that Mark Laredo has started out his term. Mayor Laredo seemed pretty moderate during the race. We had an opportunity to debate, not really debate, but we had forums. We sat down together at a beautiful event that the League of Women Voters had the night at the races, and we exchanged ideas. And at no point in time did I think that he was going to turn and put illegal aliens before the citizens of Newton and the citizens of the United States. And sadly, he went into Boston, sat down with Mayor Wu, and they both signed statements saying that ICE was not welcome in Newton. ICE is a federal law enforcement agency. They don't have borders that they can't cross into Newton. I was shocked. The only thing that Mayor Laredo should be talking to Mayor Wu about is the city of Boston paying the difference in what the state pays us to educate their students that come from out of our system. We currently run about a $10 million deficit on what it costs us to educate the students that come in from Boston to be educated and what we get reimbursed on. And for a city having a $1.4 billion unfunded pension and OPEB liability, I don't think it's fair for the citizens of Newton to be picking up that burden. So I'm not very happy with the way things are going so far in his administration.
Well, you're referring to, of course, Metco. That's quite true. And when I was a regular columnist for the Tab, I touched on that several times. Metco is like the third rail of Newton politics. People very rarely touch it or want to go near it. You're one of the few courageous people who did. But you're right. You're exactly right. Why do we educate the students from Boston for free? And it's very costly, especially if a student is on special ed. The cost can almost double. It's very expensive. And yes, the state picks up some of the costs, but the city of Boston can and should pick up a lot of the costs, but they don't. They don't. And when last I heard, there were in excess of 400 Metco students from Boston here. So that's a huge expense. But again, the liberal establishment in Newton doesn't even want to debate it or touch on it or do anything, even though we're not talking about the kids, the problem with bringing in the kids. We're talking from Boston. We're talking about the expense involved, that somebody could and should pay for it. But you know, Al, what a lot of people don't realize is that when you touched on the issue of Newton is actually a sanctuary citizen, a city, and they call it a welcoming city. Now, what does that mean, really? Well, it's a different term, but it's still a sanctuary city. And this is a problem. It's one of several dozen in the country. There aren't a lot in this country, but Newton is among them. And the problem is, of course, is that this is in direct violation of federal law, and eventually something is going to happen in Newton where some illegal immigrants are going to be caught, apprehended, or pursued, and ICE is going to be here. It will happen. It's happened before, and it will happen again. And then we'll see what the community and specifically what the political leadership of the city will do. Now, one of the issues that we're facing in a city like Newton, for example, is that when there is an issue, when there's a problem with, for example, ICE or illegal immigrants coming here, and even problems with issues with school funding, the reality is that the federal government, even if they wanted to, they can't target Newton and threaten to cut off funds. Why? Because all the funding for Newton comes to the state. In other words, the federal government will give a big package of money, a huge amount of money, to the state, to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They in turn will disperse it to the communities. So we've dealt with this issue about sanctuary cities before, in that unless the federal government comes in specifically and targets Massachusetts, threatens to cut off all federal funding to Massachusetts, then it's hard to really target a place like Newton and to hit them in the pocketbook, because we don't have that leverage specifically here. I wish that we did. But in the meantime, what we can do is try to cajole and convince, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, it will fall on deaf ears, but we're going to try nonetheless. Now, but you know, one thing about Newton that people have to realize within the community is that Newton is a known entity in federal circles, especially in the White House. I know people who work there, and I've dealt with people over time in the administration and prior administrations, and Newton is seen as a very wealthy, smug, liberal Democrat enclave, and with almost a record for donations to Democrat candidates, especially Democrat presidential candidates. And then you combine that with the accurate image of Massachusetts being to the far left, with Mayor Michelle Wu and Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren and Governor Maura Healey. It's the picture of Massachusetts is very liberal, and Newton is almost the headquarters of that. So the point being is that at some point the Trump administration could come in to the state and just decide, well, we're going to cut off funding until they get their act together, until they stop with the sanctuary cities, until such a time the state decides to get rid of all the radical left-wing ideology in the schools, which it varies from school system to school system, but it's still here and apparent, despite presidential executive orders to the contrary. And I've heard rumors milling about that the White House could come after certain states to do that. By that I mean to cut off federal funding, or at least threaten to do it. Now, it's unlikely that, despite the president's misgivings on California and the obnoxious governor there, that they'll do it in California. California is too big. It's just too large an entity. Massachusetts is not. So my guess is, if the White House wants to make an example of a defiant, radical left-wing state, it's going to be Massachusetts. Because, again, we have no Republicans of note on any statewide office. Even New Jersey does. Even California does. Every other state does except us. We are a total monotheistic Democrat enclave. But I will say this also. We in the state Republican Party, we try very hard. We try very hard to change that, and we're working all the time to do that. And we're going to try moving forward, and we're trying to unseat this very unpopular radical left-wing governor and her cohorts. We're trying very hard to do that. And we're trying very hard to unseat the radical congressman, and the only difference among them is that one is more radical than the other. So that being said, I want to reassure people that the Massachusetts Republican Party is alive and well, and we're trying our hard, we're trying our damnedest to get things going. We really are. And in last year's municipal elections, we made some inroads. We had good candidates running who won. Some won mayor's races, like in Taunton, and others ran and didn't win, such as Al and Newton, but we are trying. And we need more candidates like Al to run on a statewide level, or at least in their districts for state rep and state senate. And bear in mind, it's not too late. You have plenty of time to get papers and to fill them out, and you don't need to get a lot of signatures. That's the interesting part about it. You don't need a lot to run, but the idea is to run. You can make a difference. And how about you, Al? Would you consider running?
Well, if the right situation presented itself, I would consider a run for a statewide office. But that would have to be with the full backing of the Mass State Republican Party. And they have not seemed interested in building a farm team. They seem that they're more concerned with just the governor's race. And until we have a farm team, I don't think the Republican Party in Massachusetts is going to go very far.
No, that's a fair assessment. And, to your point, I remember how 20 years ago, a former candidate and a friend, Jim Rappaport, raised that issue exactly. And so we're still working on it. We have to get better. We have to get better at that. Yeah. By farm team, you mean, of course, local assemblymen, or rather local aldermen, school committee members, and selectmen, et cetera, et cetera. So that's important. You're right. Yeah. But Al, what I'd like to touch on also is the president's speech, State of the Union last week, which I thought, in addition to being very long, was brilliant. I really did. And it was so captivating. It was so entertaining. I mean, even his critics have to admit that Donald Trump is a very good showman. I mean, he can hold an audience. He's very entertaining. But one thing that you and I noticed, and I think millions of people across the country noticed, is that when Trump would, for example, publicize and highlight heroes in the audience that he invited on various topics, and the cameras would pan out to the Democrats, and they wouldn't stand. they just wouldn't stand for a lot of people. Now, to their credit, they did stand for the U.S. hockey team, which
Yes,
how
they
in the
did.
world can you not?
Yep.
But many of the times, the cameras panned in, zoomed in on Elizabeth Warren, and she's sitting there like I was going to say a stone Indian, but a stone-faced, whatever you want to call it. And she was just sitting there, like a statue. And then when he raised the question of whom do you support, American citizens or illegal aliens? And of course, the Republicans stood up and clapped for him, and the Democrats sat and did nothing. And that to me was very typical, but very, not very strange, but very offensive almost.
Yeah. I'd actually say it was sad. I think that anybody in an elected office that doesn't realize that they work for the people that vote in this country should be voted out. We employ them. I employ Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Markey. I employ Mayor Laredo. They work for me, and they don't realize it. When I ran for mayor, that was one of my platforms, is that I would work for the residents of Newton, not the developers, not the state government. I would work for what was best for Newton and its people. And we need to get more people into office that understand that they work for us.
You're exactly right. And Al, in the state Republican Party, we do have, and we have had, very good candidates running for a statewide office. For example, John Deaton. He's an ex-Marine, self-made millionaire. He grew up in poverty, grew up in a very challenged home environment. And he's a very stand-up guy, and he was a wonderful candidate against Elizabeth Warren 2 years ago. So we gave people a choice. You can vote for her, you can vote for him. And she won by 60% of the vote, he got 40%. And people said, oh, that's great, he got 40%. Well, no, it's not, because unless he gets 51%, then he lost.
Yeah.
So the point is that we give people the choice. We give voters a choice. You can vote for her, the liberal Democrat, or you can vote for the honorable Marine, who's a Republican. And they voted for her. And those who meet him like him and will agree with just about everything he says, unless you're a hardcore liberal. But still, for the life of me, I can't figure out, they still came out to vote for Elizabeth Warren. Now, John Deaton is also running against Ed Markey, who, by the way, wasn't at the State of the Union address, nor were many of the Congress people from Massachusetts. And so we're still appealing to, we're not at the begging stage yet, but we're giving people a second chance to vote for Deaton against the very elderly now. If Markey gets elected, he'll be in his mid-80s by the time he finishes. It's a 6-year term.
6 years, yeah.
And John Deaton is young and spry, he's energetic, and he's a real patriot. So my point being is that you got to come out and vote for our candidates. They're good candidates, they're superior candidates. You put them in debates, they win. You won. I saw a few of the debates with you and the current mayor, Mark Laredo. You won those debates. You did. And still, the voter turnout in Newton was very low. What was it, Al?
I think it was only about 40%.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Now, let's say if we got, in Newton, what tends to happen in presidential elections, it can be 80 to 90%. Yeah. And in the statewide election this year, it will probably be 50%. But the elections that are closer to home are the ones that people need to come out and vote for. They need to come out and vote for mayor. They need to come out and vote for state rep. They need to come out in the midterms to vote for our candidates. And oddly enough, and I'm not saying stay home in a presidential election, don't. But when you have 90% of the people who are coming out in a presidential election, and you have less than 50% in a city election, there's something wrong with that. In other words, it's backwards. It should be the other way around.
Well, I think they should both be about 90%.
They should.
I don't think there's any excuse for not going out to vote. It's one of the most wonderful rights we have in America. I believe that the Save America is going to help undisenfranchise all of us that have lost our votes because people that shouldn't be eligible to vote are voting. In Massachusetts, currently we have the motor voter law, where once you get your license, you're automatically enrolled to vote unless you opt out. And we give licenses to people who aren't citizens and aren't eligible to vote. We need to do an audit with that, along with the audit that State Auditor DeZaglio is trying to get through, that 72% of the citizens of Massachusetts voted for, and the governor and the attorney general are trying to block it. We need transparency, and the stuff that they're getting away with is only possible because we're in a one-party state. We need to elect Republicans into these positions. So first off, when we do finally get a Republican governor again, he can he can uphold a veto, and it's not automatically overturned. And without people in the House and the Senate, we can't do that. And so we need to work on a farm team before we work on a governor. We need to build our party from the ground up, and that's not being done.
We have very good candidates for governor.
Yeah.
And Maura Healey needs to go. She has to go. And hopefully this will be the year for that to happen. And I think that there's a very good chance that should happen. It should happen. Could it happen? We're going to try very hard. But again, we need a lot more than 50% of people coming out to vote. The largest block in the state, voting block in the state, it's not Democrats, it is independents. And if we can just get them to come out and vote against the socialist governor, vote against the socialist senator, vote against the socialist Congress people, then we can win. You know, I mean, we don't need to have the title of the most liberal state in the union, which we are right now. We are. We are more liberal than California. At least California has 5 to 7 Congress people. We don't have any. Yeah. And you know, they have a lot of Republican state representatives, assembly people, whatever they call them out there. We don't have that many. But we're trying real hard, and we need the help of the public. We need your support. So Al, this is the fastest 30 minutes in talk and cable TV talk. So please, if you'd like to wrap it up.
Well, I'd just like to let everybody know that on the first Wednesday of the month, I run a program at the American Legion, Post 440 on California Street, called the Larry Young Blues Jam. It's a free event. Come on down to listen to the blues. I bring in a guest to play with our house band. Bring your instrument. We'd love to get you up on stage to play with us. And then every Saturday night, I bring in a band. It's called Saturday Night Live at the Legion. You can find us on Facebook. What we do is we bring in a band, we get pizza. Once the pizza and the band are paid for by the admission charge, all the other money goes to help veterans. So I'd love to see some of you guys out and help the veteran community.
And by the way, Al is always Santa Claus on Christmas morning when we visit the New England Center for Homeless Veterans. He's Santa Claus, and he's been doing that for several years. So thank you, Al, for that. Thank you for your community involvement and for everything you do with veterans.
Thank you, Tom.
And thank you for being a good Republican.
Oh, thank you, and you too. And thank you for being a great man.